Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Canucks Conversation, a presentation today of the VGH Millionaire Lottery. David Quadrelli, Harmon Dial, our technical producer, the man at the controls, is Grady Sass. How's everybody doing today? How are you feeling, Harm?
Doing well. I unintentionally realized that I am wearing way too much Adidas. I've got the shoes, the track pants, the sweater, and then the track jacket.
No, wow. Okay, so all the layers are Adidas. Wow.
We need a sponsorship.
Yeah, you need a sponsorship, no doubt. Absolutely. I got my Nation Network hoodie on as we do this show from the iconic Sheraton Wall Center. As I said, today's episode is a presentation of the VGH Millionaire Lottery. You could be a multimillionaire for just $100. With your VGH Millionaire Lottery tickets, you get in to win one of 10 grand prize options, including home packages in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, the Okanagan, Vancouver Island, or you can take $2.7 million in tax-free cash. And don't forget to get your 50-50 plus tickets where you can win half of BC's biggest jackpot. It can grow to 2.4 million, folks, so don't miss out. Early buyers win more, including bonus draws and 51 early bird draws. We all need VGH, and VGH needs you. Every ticket purchase supports VGH and the UBC Hospital Foundation. With your Millionaire Lottery tickets, you are supporting more than just hospital care. You are supporting you and your loved ones who need it most. Order your tickets toll-free at 1-888-445-5825, in person at London Drugs, or online at millionairelottery.com. 19 plus to play. Know your limit. Play within it. Anthony Beauvillier knew his limits this season. As a result, he's been traded to the Chicago Blackhawks. You like that transition?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Thank you. Anthony Beauvillier to the Chicago Blackhawks for a 5th round pick. We have a game to break down, folks. A 3-1 victory over the Anaheim Ducks. But first, we got to get to it. Anthony Beauvillier traded to the Chicago Blackhawks. We had a listener, Andy, regular listener of the show, said, okay, emergency pod time. We've done emergency podcasts. Faber and I did them. We did one for the Tyler Toffoli trade way back when. I think that was our first emergency podcast. We've done them for other reasons as well. I think we've had a total of 5, and for some reason the topics are escaping me. I think we had one about the OEL trade. We did an emergency podcast. Maybe the buyout as well. We might have had 2 OEL themed emergency podcasts, but no, Anthony Beauvillier for a 5th round pick, not enough for an emergency podcast. Let's talk about it today.
Yeah, so right off the bat, I think we can all agree it's an opportunistic win for the Canucks to get his cap hit off the books. Of course, it would have been ideal if you had somehow found a way to shed it in the summer, where that cap space would have been a lot more valuable then than it is now. But if the Canucks had avenues to realistically clear cap space in the summer, I'm sure they would have done it. They turned over many stones before pulling the trigger on the Oliver Ekman-Larsson buyout. So this is, again, opportunistic is just the best way of describing it, right? Chicago, because of their need to terminate Corey Perry's contract plus Taylor Hall being out for the entire season, they are in such a shortage of top 9 NHL wingers, and that's exactly what Anthony Beauvillier can do. I mean, poor Connor Bedard. The guy's spent a big chunk recently of his 5-on-5 ice time with Nick Foligno. Earlier in the year, Chicago's first unit power play had Ryan Donato featured on it, and it's just hilarious watching their power play because it's as if the penalty killers don't even care about the other threats. They're just shadowing Bedard. So he needed more help. We don't know, obviously, if Beauvillier is going to play on Bedard's wing necessarily, but they just needed more offensive talent because it really was Bedard and then sort of everybody else on that team.
You have to think he's going to get a shot there at some point, especially when all you did is give up a 5th round pick for him. They're going to give him a shot with Bedard. They have to. He's going to get a shot with them. I think he actually might do well. It's similar to what we saw when he came to Vancouver last season in his little heater that he went on to finish out last year, playing alongside Elias Pettersson, who was obviously red hot for all of last season, really. But Connor Bedard, you have to think that Beauvillier is going to get a shot with him.
Yeah, and the Hawks have had weird success rehabilitating Canucks reclamation projects. Jason Dickinson had 30 points last year. This year, he's up to 7 goals and 12 points in 20 games. That's more goals and points than he ever scored in a Canucks uniform. People in Chicago are describing him as a legit third-line center on a good team. And like that, him being that type of potential trade
You
chip
say
as a
people in
rental for
Chicago,
somebody.
but with those kind of numbers and what he's doing defensively for Chicago, it's an accurate statement.
Yeah.
Like he is a good third line center on a good team.
And it's funny because it was such a disastrous fit in Vancouver. The way he played in a Canucks uniform 2 years ago, he would not, if that same version of Dickinson was on the Canucks' roster today, he would not crack the top 12 forwards. Nils Aman would be in the lineup over him.
Yep.
And yet here he is back as the third line center the Canucks hoped he originally was when they acquired him. So maybe Beauvillier ends up having similar success. It definitely feels like he could pop, but that opportunity and fit just wasn't right here. And for the Canucks, who've been so pressed up against the cap, to have some breathing room, even just in the interim, to be able to, for instance, today recall an extra forward in Linus Karlsson, it just helps to have that extra little bit of flexibility. Of course, it could help them sign Ethan Bear now, potentially make some upgrades down the road closer to the trade deadline. It's a nice piece of business for the Canucks.
Grady, let's get a look at the call-ups here that they made today. The Canucks made some roster moves. Matt Irwin gets recalled. Linus Karlsson gets recalled along with him. Akito Hirose goes down to Abbotsford. Don't think that came as much of a surprise. We had Karan in our chat yesterday saying if he's not going to play, just send him down. And I feel like that's a fair statement and one that the general manager obviously agreed with because Akito Hirose has been assigned to the Abbotsford Canucks. Matt Irwin recalled from Abbotsford. So nice for the local kid to get that NHL salary. And Linus Karlsson as well recalled from Abbotsford. People in the chat are asking about Christian Wolanin. I think he's just a little banged up, but he's going to continue to progress. And I think that's what the team wants to see from him is just get back to 100% and then come out and maybe he'll be a help to the NHL squad at some point. Any surprises on these roster moves for you?
Not really. Again, as you sort of mentioned, it makes more sense to have Hirose playing professional games because despite how old he is, you have to remember that he's barely had pro experience, and the more reps he can gain, the faster he can hopefully acclimate. Plus, we know at this point that the coaching staff doesn't quite have that trust level in him. Maybe they'll have a bit more of that in Matt Irwin. Doesn't hurt to give him a shot in, let's say, seventh defenseman role if you need somebody to fill in the lineup or somebody ends up temporarily getting banged up. So no real surprises there. I mean, Karlsson didn't look out of place in the one game we saw him, so it makes sense to be carrying an extra forward around. Now that you have the cap space to do that, all sensible.
I just want to give this take on the Beauvillier trade before we shift to last night's game. You and I were chatting about this right before we came in, and I've seen a lot of this, especially on social media, just people having this idea that, well, this is an utter failure because they traded for Beauvillier as a part of the Horvat deal, and some people were saying, oh, he's the main piece in the Horvat deal, and they just gave him up for a 5th-round pick. Look, the 1st-round pick was the main piece in that deal. Achu Ratu was ahead of Beauvillier in that deal. I know when he spoke about him, Patrick Allvin kind of fluffed it up and said, yeah, we basically got 3 first-round picks. I always viewed acquiring Beauvillier as the Islanders countering and saying, hey, if you want a 1st-round pick and you want our top prospect, it's going to cost you in terms of taking back some salary. And that's what the Canucks had to do. Is that was just my view of the trade, was that was the cost of doing business. I don't think, even though the general manager fluffed up the player when he spoke about it when the trade went down, I always viewed that as okay, this was someone they had to take back. That's just how I viewed the trade. So I guess when I see him flip for a 5th-round pick, I don't lose sleep over it.
Yeah, to me, it was a pure cap dump when it happened. Islanders had been looking to move Beauvillier for a really long time. They had trouble finding suitors. And you could at least understand, even at the time, the logic for the Canucks where, okay, Beauvillier was probably a piece they needed to take back even to make the cap math work for the Islanders. Plus, you're thinking, okay, this guy could potentially be a handy middle six forward in case we end up. You have to remember last year, the Canucks were heavily shopping Boeser and Garland. So they may have even been thinking from a perspective of, if we move one of those guys out, Beauvillier, he's been a handy middle 6 forward. He could offer short-term top 9 help there. And then we can capitalize on the cap space once his contract actually expires. So I understood why he was part of the original deal, and I'm glad now that clearly since the fit was so awkward that they were able to get him off the books.
As we transition this conversation into, yeah, go on.
One thing I wanted to say is just in general, a lot of these moves at the margins, especially lately, have really helped the Canucks. When you look at even going back to clearing Tanner Pearson's salary and getting Casey DeSmith for only a third-round pick. I mean, DeSmith's been excellent. I mean, think of what the Canucks' situation might have been in net without DeSmith, and perhaps they don't have as many wins as they do, right? Same sort of thing for Sam Lafferty, the way he's upgraded their bottom six, playing at center, given the injuries to Bluger first and then Suter recently.
That's Jack Studnicka if they don't make that trade. Like, that's the difference that we're talking about here.
Yeah, and now you basically get back the fifth that you gave up in the Lafferty deal, so it's not as if you're at a draft pick deficit there. And then even Mark Friedman, he's slipped recently, but for a while there, when the Canucks were winning a lot of games, he was offering really steady minutes next to Ian Cole. Again, the way Juleson turned it around recently, but the way Juleson was performing beforehand, if that was Juleson in the lineup instead of Friedman during that sort of middle stretch of the start, Canucks' blue line depth would not have been as steady. You would have had a lot more nervousness watching them play. So some tidy work by the Canucks with some of these acquisitions over the last couple months.
On tomorrow's show, this was from producer Grady. Great idea from him. We're going to do a total record. This is homework for all of us. 3 independent records. We're not going to come to an agreement. 3 independent ones. Don't show your work to each other, of wins, losses, and ties / toss-ups for the Canucks record with trading since Patrick Galvin has come in. And we'll break down all of our records tomorrow. That'll be on Thursday's show. But before that, on Wednesday's show, we need to talk about the 3-1 victory over the Anaheim Ducks on Tuesday night. And the guy I want to talk about first, Harman, is kind of a transition with Beauvillier, and that's Nils Aman, because I thought he's been great. I thought last night especially, there were a few times where I was watching him and saying, there's a north-south player. Like, there's a player that Tocchet's going to really like. He had that rush, I believe it was in the first period, where goes into the zone and basically goes through 2 Anaheim defenders and just gets right to the net. And I think it was like a backhand chop on goal is what it ended up being, because he had to fight through some traffic, but still got to the net, put the puck on net. And like, hey, that's a dangerous opportunity when you're that close to the net. So I was really impressed with Nils Aman last night. I think the organization as a whole has been very impressed with him. That's why he got the 2-year deal, notably at a one-way contract. So he's going to make his salary no matter where he's playing. Organization clearly believes this is a guy who can play in the NHL. I think that had a lot, Nils Aman had a lot to do with why they felt comfortable moving on from Anthony Beauvillier.
Really?
Well, think about your lineup. Think about your lineup, right? Mm-hmm. When everybody's healthy, is Nils Aman there? Maybe, maybe not. But your overall depth, I think you're more happy with Nils Aman in a bottom 6 role than you are Anthony Beauvillier, especially when you take into consideration the cap hit. And look, this is a team that has shown us with moves like the Sam Lafferty trade that they're not okay with just having a mediocre bottom 6. So you know that they're not going to say, okay, well, we really need this money, so while Aman is a huge step down and we don't like him in the lineup, we're going to move Beauvillier. I think the only reason I definitely shouldn't say only reason. I think a big part of the reason they felt comfortable moving on from him was just how Aman has played so far and how he's played in Abbotsford. Like, this is a point per game player in the AHL this season.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. I hadn't thought about it that way since Aman's more of a center and Beauvillier is a winger, but the way you laid it out does make some sense. And you're bang on in that. I really like how he's performed. I think he looks much better than he did last season, where
for sure
it sort of felt like he hadn't quite filled out his frame, whereas now it feels like he's stronger protecting pucks. I mean, last season he'd get laid out consistently. Like, I don't know how many huge hits he just got.
He was wearing it in preseason too, like from his teammates. Like, there was, hey, Tyler Myers, friendly fire. That's the topic we were talking about right before. There was a hit in practice where Tyler Myers just laid out Nils Aman and he didn't see him coming. That was happening in the preseason. And it's interesting you bring that up, and not to cut you off or anything, but Rick Tocchet spoke about that last year when he talked about what he needed to see from Nils Aman moving forward. It was just that he's got a great hockey IQ. Like, we've seen that. That's why he was able to play in that defensive role under Bruce Boudreau, as much as one can under Bruce Boudreau. But he needed to fill out, and he needed to get better at being harder on pucks, I think was what Tocchet referred to. And you just pointed out, like, winning your board battles, not getting blown up every time you touch the puck, that kind of thing. And I think he's made improvements there. Still room to grow as well.
Yeah, the way he bulldozed his way to the net for the scoring chance you referenced is a perfect example of that, because ultimately, if you want to be a checking bottom six player, you have to win battles to do that, especially down low. And Aman, with his height, has always had the potential to be a bigger guy. And now it feels like he's sort of more assertive physically. You definitely notice as well how attention and detail oriented he is. A lot of times you see when the Canucks' defensemen are under pressure with a loose puck behind the net or on the breakout, Aman is so consistently coming below the dots to help them out. To make a little play to help that line get out of trouble. So I've definitely liked his game since he's been recalled.
He's also approaching waiver eligibility. Correct me if I'm wrong. So they don't necessarily want to take that risk in sending him back down, because they got Pius Suter coming back soon from injury. At least we hope he's coming back soon. I know there's been some setbacks, but I also think too, seeing Hoglander elevate his game allowed them to, and Alvin touched on this today, is that it's kind of shaking the lines out, and Beauvillier became redundant. I think you can make the argument he was already redundant, probably back to when they first acquired him. But now that Hoglander's really sprung onto the scene here, there's only so many roster spots available to go around.
That's a great point, Grady. And back to what you said, Harman, Brock Boeser and Connor Garland, you mentioned them as maybe Beauvillier was a backup in case those guys aren't going anywhere. We already know Brock wants to stay, leading the NHL in goals, might I add. So of course he wants to stay, and of course the Canucks want to keep him, because all of a sudden it looks like Brock Boeser's on a bargain contract. But Connor Garland as well, that was the guy that there was a lot of smoke at the start of the year. We heard about the agent getting permission to talk trades. The latest reporting we've heard there, and we'll talk to Frank Seravalli later in this show, so maybe he can give us some more insight on that. The latest we've heard is that those have kind of quieted down, and Connor Garland's a little more happy being on a winning Vancouver Canucks team. So just something to consider, that, this Beauvillier trade, on top of what we just said about Aman, somehow we talked about Nils Aman for almost 10 minutes. You also have to consider that Connor Garland is now a part of this team, and Brock Boeser is now a driver on this team, playing on the top line, playing in a matchup role. Let's talk about him. The 3-1 victory. Brock Boeser, hockey fights cancer night. Couldn't write much of a better story. Scores the opening goal on a backhand, which was great to see, just getting right into the crease. And then the long missile. He even referenced, I can't remember who it was that asked him. He even referenced Louis Eriksson last night.
I think it was Drance.
Drance, there you go. He even referenced texting Louis for some tips about closing out games. The closer, Louis Eriksson, Brock Boeser scores the empty netter, first and last goal for the Canucks last night. 2 goals, puts them at 17, top of the league lead, with Nikita Kucherov in second with 15.
Yeah, I think his first goal shows his continued evolution in that he's not, when Brock entered the league, he was sniping bar down. He was this electric player. He was consistently beating goalies from distance, but that's not sustainable in the NHL, especially when teams recognize that, okay, this guy has a good shot. We're going to have to eliminate this guy's time and space. So Boeser's evolved in becoming a player that can produce offense from the interior. How much has he grown as a net front player, both in terms of tips, deflections, screens, but also rebounds? How consistently he's paying the price to get to those high traffic premium scoring areas. I think that goal was a perfect reflection of that, especially because he's the type of player that excels when there's other chaos happening in the offensive zone. And what I mean by that is that play started with DiGiuseppe had somehow ended up at the point. Miller was at the point. DiGiuseppe had the puck, and then they sort of exchanged where DiGiuseppe sort of went back to the point. Miller picked up the puck on the right half wall. Then you had Hronek darting down, which fantastic job by him, activating from the point to create some movement. Because if 5 guys are just standing stationary in the offensive zone, all that's going to happen is you're going to work the puck back to the point shot. It's so easy for the opposing team to be in their structure and just keep shots to the perimeter. But with Hronek darting down and all this chaos happening, Miller was able to find him. That's when the defense is so preoccupied with the movement of Hronek, with the exchange of Miller and DiGiuseppe at the point, that Brock just kind of gets lost. And I think that's what he does so well now, is even a lot of times when you look at some of his other 5-on-5 goals, where early in the season when DiGiuseppe was really effective on the forecheck and then Miller would steal a puck on the goal line, the defensemen were so preoccupied with them turning it over and scrambling to get into position that they wouldn't be able to track Boeser in the slot, and Miller would just quickly whip a pass to Boeser in the middle of the ice there, and he'd get a shot off. So he's the type of player that thrives on just slipping under the radar when there's a lot of havoc happening. So that's been really impressive to see.
Andrei Kuzmenko's return to the lineup as well. Talkit called him okay a couple times. He said, I thought he played okay. Yes, I thought he played okay. Did not want to comment further than that on Andrei Kuzmenko's game. What do you think of his game? No points last night. I called him to score a goal. He didn't. What do you think of his game?
I thought it was more of what we've typically seen from him, in that he didn't play that poorly, but he wasn't very noticeable offensively either. His best moment, of course, was distracting John Gibson in front of the net on Pettersson's wraparound goal. That's a legitimately good player, right? Talkit has spoken about the importance of getting to the net, battling, paying the price. Kuzmenko showed excellent net front skills during his first season with the team. Him getting to the net there and getting right up in Gibson's grill, it's great stuff there. But outside of that, I thought he was sort of shaky again with the puck. And it's interesting because what I did for this game was I tracked every notable puck touch he had, which is sort of similar to what some NHL teams and coaching staffs do to evaluate players. And it's interesting where he had a stretch in the first period where he quietly really struggled. And this is why I think sometimes it doesn't necessarily show up in a really costly giveaway, but I noted 4 plays in a row in the first period where Kuzmenko got the puck and the play just died and the other team was able to get going. So for instance, 15:41, it got time-stamped here. Kuzmenko tries to enter the offensive zone, make an entry pass to Mikheyev. It's broken up. 2 minutes later, Hughes off an offensive zone faceoff win, sends a puck down to Kuzmenko. Kuzmenko loses the wall battle. Canucks' offensive zone possession ends. 4 minutes later, Kuzmenko gets the puck in the slot. This is a little spinorama, and I actually loved the creativity of this move. I want him to make that play, but puck gets knocked off Mikheyev's stick, and the offensive zone possession ends. Then a few minutes later, again, Kuzmenko tries to rim the puck around the wall on the power play to Miller. The pass is out of JT Miller's reach, and the Ducks clear. So that's 4 straight puck touches where none of them are egregious plays, but they all started with Kuzmenko having the puck in an offensive position, and they all ended with the puck leaving the attacking zone. Of course, he settled down from there, but there's still a lot of room for improvement, I think, in how many productive puck touches he has offensively.
The thing I noticed most about him was when he started rushing into the zone and started actually moving his feet, which only made me realize that, whoa, he wasn't doing that before. Why am I noticing this? Because every other player on the team seems to do that. So to me, he stood out for trying, but it also kind of gave me a, kind of put a spotlight on the fact that sometimes he doesn't do those things. And the fact that I'm noticing it, anyways, I'm sure Rick Tocchet feels the same way. And that's probably why he said, yeah, I thought he was okay last night. We're going to get to Frank Seravalli in moments. We're going to do anyone else afterwards, but because we're not ready for Frank just yet, this is a perfect time for me to talk about our friends at 4 Winds Brewing. Family owned and operated in Delta, home to the 4 Winds Light Lager, a crisp, clean, and easy drinking beer, a beer for everyone, a perfect beer for before, after, or during the game. Ask for 4 Winds Light Lager at your local liquor store or have some delivered right to your door through the online shop at 4windsbrewing.ca. I'll tell you what, I could have used a few 4 Winds watching the opening 40 minutes for the Vancouver Canucks, where they got outplayed by the noted wagon Anaheim Ducks. we didn't really touch on that, the start of that game, where I thought every line had a good first 2 shifts, and then I thought every line took a step back, and then I thought in the second period, I was like, oh, okay, this team that was doing so well to start the year, they're not legit. They're not a good team because they're losing to the Anaheim Ducks here. They just didn't
wagon Ducks.
They didn't come to play against the Ducks, who, by all means, they're a fantastic organization, great team. But the second period, it was abysmal for the Canucks.
Are they a great team? Are the Ducks a great team? It's like me saying, oh, there's so many good defensemen in this organization.
So many good defensemen in Canucks history to pick from, Harman.
But yeah, you're right. I sort of marked it down as the first 13 minutes of the first period. I thought the Canucks were all over Anaheim, winning every puck battle. They looked fast. They looked tenacious. It almost looked like they were bullying the Ducks in some spots when it came to 50-50 puck battles. It sort of felt like older brother plays little brother in a game of pickup basketball, and it's just like, I'm going to post you up.
Yep.
You're too small. But then in the final 7 minutes, the Ducks started to get going. I thought they were sparked, especially by that power play they got towards the end of the period. And then the second period, yeah, the Canucks were dominated. Again, I think in large part because of the special teams. The Ducks' power play was zipping the puck around. It was inevitable that their power play was going to score. It felt like how much pressure they had. McTavish was so many good looks. And even the cross-seam pass that led to Ryan Strom's goal, not loving how the PK looked in that game by any means. Meanwhile, the Canucks' power play, they had occasional looks like the JT Miller breakaway, but they didn't have that same level of sustained pressure. And it felt like that momentum differential translated to 5-on-5, which is why I think it was so surprising then to see the momentum change again, where the Canucks had a fantastic third period. And not only does Pettersson finally get back on the board with a 5-on-5 goal, but what I loved is the Canucks didn't rest on their laurels after gaining the lead. They kept their foot on the gas, and it was similar to the way they defended the lead in Seattle, where they just kept attacking. They just kept outworking them. It wasn't like we've seen in previous seasons where this team gets up and they're like, okay, we're going to be ultra conservative. We're going to sit back. We're going to be passive, and we're just going to park the bus. They were continuing to create chances, create looks. They just dominated the Ducks in that third period, which is really impressive to see again, because last year, there's no way the Canucks would have held on to a lead the way they did last night.
I think the shots on goal per period tells the story here. 12-6 for Anaheim in the first period, 15-6 for Anaheim in the second period, and then 4 for Anaheim, 15 for Vancouver, 31-27. The total shots in that game. Thatcher Demko stops 30 of 31 shots faced. He had a good quote. We'll get to that in anyone else, because that's my anyone else topic for the day. So we'll get to that. Oh, Frank just said hang on again.
I will say, for the first period, I thought the shots, even though the Ducks had a clear advantage, I think they were misleading, because I counted at least 2 or 3 rushes where the Canucks had numbers, but it was a threatening looking rush, but the pass into the slot got intercepted or something along those lines. Like I had at least one from Boeser that I counted. There were 1 or 2 more that I had sort of noted and remembered. And those don't count as scoring chances on paper. Those don't count as shots or even shot attempts. But to me, the way that the play was developing, that was a legit scoring chance. So statistically, I think the shot totals don't tell the story of what I thought overall was a good period for the Canucks.
Yeah, I think the shot totals more tell the story of the second period, because for the first half of the first period, the Canucks looked like a good team. They looked like a good team. They looked like a great team in third period. What really interested me was the San Jose was a wake-up call quote from Rick Tocchet, and then his team falls asleep in the second period. I can only imagine what the conversation was like in the intermission, the second intermission. I'm sure there was another wake-up call delivered. My question is whether it was from the coaching staff or if it was from the leadership group, the players, because Tocchet's spoken so much about being kind of hands-off and how the leadership group, these guys can handle it themselves. They do a good job of keeping everybody in line. I wonder what that wake-up call actually looked like. We got Frank standing by. He told us to hang on, so I think he's on the phone with a general manager. That's all I can come to. But let me get this in here, because it's a good time with Daddy Faceoff standing by to talk about the Wendy's Daily Faceoff Survivor Pool game. Wendy's is letting you win real food with your fantasy teams this year with the Wendy's Daily Faceoff Survivor Pool. For those of you who dream of smoking the competition, Wendy's is rewarding you with weekly prizes that will have you winning. But here's the big secret to lineups. It's all serendipitous, like Wendy's new limited edition chicken strips and French toast sticks. Sometimes the best teammates are the ones you'd least suspect. Sign up to play Daily Faceoff Survivor Pool to win weekly prizes like new chicken strips and French toast sticks from Wendy's and the Wendy's app. Have you seen this? I've seen this on all the bus benches. I think it's super cool. It's like you get the chicken strips with French toast sticks. It's kind of like chicken and waffles type thing. You know what I mean? You're mixing the sweet and savory.
What are French toast sticks?
Have you never had French toast sticks
No.
from Wendy's? They're actually, I'm not even doing an ad right now. They're delicious. The French toast sticks.
If you can pronounce them properly.
Yeah. My French toast stick story is that I think it was in Victoria. I can't remember where you were. Faber and I ordered Wendy's. Actually, no, we were at his place. We ordered Wendy's and we got the breakfast Baconator. And Faber's like, oh, these French toast sticks are new. And we ordered those and they were delicious. They were so good. I'm sure these are good too. And this is basically mixing those French toast sticks, which are delicious, with chicken strips, and you get them together. You know what I'm saying?
I love chicken strips, so maybe I'll have to give this a shot.
Yeah, people really like this. Okay, what's going on with Frank here?
Just quickly, Quads, why do I get the impression you're the type of guy that will get some fries from Wendy's and stick it in his Frosty? No ketchup. You seem like the type of guy you'd order fries at Wendy's and you'd start dipping it in your Frosty. Can you confirm or deny?
Confirm. It's delicious. Do you guys not do that?
No.
Oh, it's so good.
I've actually never had a Frosty.
Did Faber teach you that one?
No, I've been doing that for
Self-taught.
years. You've never had a Frosty?
No.
Oh my gosh. We gotta order this to the studio. Okay, I don't know where Frank is. Let's go to anyone else. Yeah, we'll get to him eventually, hopefully. Okay, let's get to anyone else. We will get to Frank when he's ready. He is not ready yet, folks. This is a live show. So let's get to anyone else presented by DoorDash. It's our listeners' chance to get involved and hit us up in the YouTube live chat. It's also our listeners' chance to get 25% off and zero delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. That's right. For a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off and zero delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when they download the DoorDash app and enter code NATION25. That's all capital letters, NATION, and the numbers 25. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change. Terms do apply. With restaurants, grocery, pharmacies, bakeries, flower shops, and more, DoorDash really has everything you need to make the holidays special. Okay, what do we got here in anyone else? I had a good anyone else, actually, and I've completely forgotten what it is. So until that comes back to me. Yes, thank you. Did anyone else, I should say, really like the quote that Thatcher Demko gave last night? This is a guy who knows how to, I don't want to use the word pander. He knows how to appeal to a crowd. He's doing his walk-off interview with Kate Pedersen, and he's asked about playing at home, that type of thing. And he just said, no, I just really like these guys. And the crowd starts cheering. And he goes, they deserve it after sticking with us the last few years. That was the quote from Thatcher Demko after he got first star of the game honors with 30 saves on 31 shots. I just thought that was a great quote. It was highlighted in the Stanchies last night. Exceptional quote from the Canucks starting netminder.
It was awesome. I also thought it was really funny. We spoke to Talkit after practice on Monday, and for those that aren't aware, Demko is very dry in those post-game scrums. He's pretty good in a one-on-one setting, especially if he's in a mood to talk. But in a post-game scrum, a lot of times I don't even bother listening in because you'll ask him a question about a specific save he made that was amazing, and he'll just be like, just trying to stop the puck. Like something like that. And it was funny because Talkit was like we think it's he just doesn't like the media, like he's just never really smiling in that thing. And then Talkit unprompted, I don't know how Demko came up, but sort of mentioned that even after wins it's hard to crack a smile out of this guy. He's just always so businesslike is how Talkit described it. And then somebody in the media chimed back and said, oh, it's not just us that he's like that with then.
That's so good. I like that. I've seen him in one-on-ones. He really gets going, obviously, with Kevin Woodley. When Kevin Woodley starts talking to him, he gets going. He really gets going with Kevin Woodley. Okay. One from Commander Vander, who now uses his real name, but I'm going to keep calling him Commander Vander. Thoughts on many shirts guy as in-arena entertainment much better than Crazy P. I like Crazy P.
You like Crazy P?
How do you? Yeah, I do, Harmon.
Why?
Because I didn't like him when it was like 2017-18. The Canucks are en route for their 23rd win of the season in game 77, and he's banging his drum. Yeah, I didn't like him back then. But now you have this wagon of a team. Why wouldn't you want that guy in your arena?
Yeah, that's fair enough to get the atmosphere going. But
thank you. No, I fully agree with you. The make some noise and him banging the drum. It makes some noise coming from the Jumbotron, but him banging the drum and trying to get everybody hyped when the Canucks are on their way to another like bottom 10 finish and they're in perpetual mediocrity. Of course you didn't like him back then, but don't let what the Canucks looked like back then. Don't blame that on Crazy P. What the hell? How is it his fault?
For years, Rogers Arena has been quieter than the library on Georgia Street.
But it's not now. Like, it's loud now.
Yeah, but it's what, just over a quarter of the season? Like, there's times where he's definitely, Crazy P, the game situation. Like, they're getting stomped 6-0. Like, now is not the time to hype the fans up. But at the same time, like, he's got a job to do. And if getting more out of the fans and making Rogers Arena a more fun, engaging atmosphere is what he has to do, then so be it. Like,
it hasn't been effective for the most part, I will say.
Fair enough. But for years, like, people complained, oh, the building is so quiet. And then the second, they see him trying to hype it up, people's like, oh, he's so cringe. Just like, let the man do his job.
I would just like them. There just needs to be a unique or creative or fun twist to it. It's just, you know what I mean?
No. I think Crazy P is unique enough.
In what way?
Show me another guy in the arena doing that. You can't. But he's wearing like wide receiver gloves. Does anybody notice that? He's got like gloves on. I love it.
I don't know. Like before you had the Clapperton.
Huh?
This is before our time.
Yeah. What's the Clapperton? You know what I miss? This is before our time. I tried to do a story on this. Remember the RC Orca that used to fly around the stands and drop like Blockbuster tickets or whatever?
No, I don't remember.
Yeah. There was an RC Orca. Someone in the chat is going to help me out here because
I remember that.
This was an early memory of mine attending Canucks games is the RC Orca flying around. I think it went back to the maybe not. No, definitely not. The RC Orca did fly around in the early mid 2000s, and I have inquired with quite a few people within the organization to try and locate it. Stay tuned. We're still looking for it. Look, that would be a great prop for the desk. I think the RC Orca. No one can find it. Like I have actually been inquiring for years about this, trying to do a story on what happened to that thing and if they'll ever bring it back. And it's not like I haven't got cooperation from the organization. I think everybody's after the same story I'm after here in the organization. They want to know what happened to it and they can't find it. Like no one can find that RC Orca. So if you're listening to this and I haven't spoken to you yet and you work with the Canucks and you know where it is, reach out. You can remain anonymous.
And the Canucks do listen and watch the show. We have confirmed that.
Once in a while. I hope it's someone
Crazy
who can
P talk
find it.
Blowing up the chat right now. Cody says where'd this go here?
Don't read a Cody
For
comment.
the longest time, Crazy P was the only guy going to the dirty areas.
That's true.
RW Hockey says, I once fought Crazy P at Rogers Arena Sports Bar.
Citation needed. Also, Commander Vander brought up a good point. Isn't Crazy P a Lions fan who got hired to hype up Canucks games?
Well, he said Crazy George was the old guy at Lions game. He basically took a shtick.
Well, Crazy P also does Lions games, right? Like you see him at Lions games. We got
the green guys references in here.
The
men, chat is absolutely buzzing right now.
Yes. The green men were a topic recently. Okay, we're gonna pause. Anyone else? Get to it after. Frank, I've already done all the ad reads, so we're ready to bring him right in here. Mr. Frank Seravalli, who we're only going to call Frank Seravalli today. No nicknames today, Frank. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. I'm a little disappointed that I didn't use a nickname, but maybe next week. Okay, we're going to get to it right away here. What do you think of the Beauvillier trade for the Canucks from their perspective?
I mean, couldn't have worked out any better. For the first time in the Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford era, the Canucks finally have some salary cap flexibility, and that's a big deal. The fact that they were able to get off of Anthony Beauvillier, I think a lot of people saw that and said, okay, so what did they give up? And no, they didn't have to pay. They actually got a little something in return. That part is got to be super exciting for Vancouver. Yes, I had seen the chat and some people liked the way that he played in the bottom six, but for commensurate to his pay, certainly wasn't producing at the level that would be required. And now the Canucks can go out and get something of value to plug in specifically to their defense core, which has been hurting, that they otherwise probably couldn't do.
Frank, I wanted to sort of follow up on this idea of what the Canucks can do now that they've got some cap space, and you alluded to the blue line. I think before there's been, and there's almost two paths the Canucks can go down. Whether it could be more of, a depth piece that's lower acquisition costs, doesn't move the needle as much. But now that they've got some flexibility, do you think it increases the odds that they perhaps take a bigger, more ambitious swing for a type of defenseman that can maybe be a bit more of a longer term fit?
I think it definitely increases the odds. My question would be how much? Just because you have the flexibility and the wherewithal to do it, it takes two to tango. It doesn't mean that there's necessarily a team out there that's willing to trade an impact piece. And that's really the hard part to figure. I've got my first trade targets board of the season coming out on Thursday, and I'm really struggling with some names because there's so many teams that are in the mix that even if they're not true, authentic playoff teams, they at least at this juncture of the season want to see things play out and see if they could possibly, if you're St. Louis or you're Nashville, if you're one of the teams that's kind of retooling and rebuilding on the fly, why cut your legs off if you can sort of sneak into a playoff spot without having to do anything? So those teams, look at Chicago, who the Canucks just traded with again. They don't have anything left to pick at. Look at, pick another team. Like there's not much more to strip down from the Anaheim Ducks as they're trying to go in a different direction and try and be more competitive. Who are you going to trade for? Adam Henrique? That doesn't help the Canucks. So the Canucks have a want and certainly a will, but it doesn't mean that someone out there is necessarily ready to facilitate. And that's been the harder part of the equation.
Frank, Brock Boeser, Connor Garland, both those guys in trade rumors. Brock, obviously more. Last year, Brock Boeser's leading the NHL in goals right now. How much did it shift the focus to Beauvillier for the Canucks that Boeser, one, wanted to stay, but two, that Garland is also a contributor to the team this year as well?
Yeah, I think for Beauvillier, it was kind of the guy that just stood out like a sore thumb. I mean, Garland has the term issue. You see the production from Boeser, and really, I think things changed for Boeser when he came out at the end of last season and said he didn't want to be traded. That is the exact demarcation, the moment in time where it was like, oh, that's interesting. Didn't see that coming. And I think that changed his whole mindset in the summer. So that part has been really important. He's obviously been a huge piece to this team this year. And Garland, I think they'd love to do it. They're just not going to find a taker with that term left. That Beauvillier was the one guy that I think put them in a spot where he was the easiest guy to move at the same time to create some of that cap flexibility that they've wanted.
Frank, just big picture, outside of Vancouver, how do you think the league, executives, coaches, the industry views the Canucks' hot start? What stands out to them? Are they believers? What's the overall commentary around this perception of the team's turnaround?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of believers, certainly in the core pieces. I think everyone has watched Pettersson and Hughes and Demko and says, wow, this is the makings of a really special trio that checks the positional boxes that you need to be successful. I think they've been a little bit skeptical in terms of some of the results and the underlying numbers. And then now watching some of the injuries on defense has certainly in the last 10 days sort of changed the perception of, hey, this is a team that probably is hanging on for a little bit of time until they can find more support on their back end, because they're right back in the same spot that they were last season, which is trying to use depth defensemen to fill and play some pretty big roles. They're not alone. The Toronto Maple Leafs are in a pretty similar spot with all the injuries that they've had on their back end so far. But I think sort of universally league-wide, the Canucks are viewed as a team that could do damage, that may not be considered one of those 5, 6, or 7 true Stanley Cup authentic threats. But I think they're a team that I look at, and I think in speaking to and getting some opinion and takes from executives around the league is that they view the Canucks as a team that could be a true wild card. And I say that not in terms of a position in the standings, but one that might be able to go on a deep run.
A deep run. I love it, Frank. You're just bringing the heat today. Okay, in your opinion, you're Frank Seravalli, how far do the Canucks go in the playoffs? Because we know their start and everything they've done so far basically secures them a playoff spot, knock on wood. But how far do you think this Canucks team goes in the playoffs?
I guess tell me where they finish in the standings, present me the bracket, and I'll tell you where they go. I mean, that's really
Second
the hard
third. Second or third in the Pacific.
I mean, that's really the spot that, you're looking at. Okay, so you play the Kings in the first round right now as constituted, and you go, oh, I really like the Kings, and I like how disciplined they are with their 1-3-1, and I do think they're vulnerable in net, but that's been pretty stable so far after a rocky first week of the season. I view, depending on matchup, the Canucks as a team that could most certainly win a round and potentially more, but I don't see them knocking off the Kings or the Golden Knights in round 1 if they have to.
All right. That's fair. That's fair. And we'll continue to ask you this question about how far they go. Frank, you wrote about the Corey Perry situation in Chicago today over at Daily Faceoff. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's, I think, one that there's still a lot left to write, because just from a pure precedent perspective, the NHLPA hasn't decided yet whether they want to grieve this, but we haven't really seen a situation where a team has terminated a contract of a player that has not necessarily done something that's illegal, that he might have been inappropriate or improper, but not illegal. And I think there's a lot of players, agents, and frankly, even some executives from other teams today saying, well, hold on a second here. What exactly are the details? What did the Chicago Blackhawks use to be able to terminate this contract? And that part, I think, has certainly been under scrutiny. And I think we're all left asking a lot of questions because we still don't know a lot. We know that, as I reported today, alcohol was involved. We know that there were team employees and corporate partners that were around, but we don't know what Corey Perry did. We don't know who witnessed it, and we don't know who reported it. And until we learn some of those details, it's kind of hard to offer some more commentary on the validity of the Chicago Blackhawks to be able to terminate his contract. And then more than that, the next question is, okay, so where does Corey Perry go from here? This is a player who was off to a good start, on track for 50-some points this year as a 38-year-old, someone that's highly respected, someone that is a borderline Hall of Fame player with a Stanley Cup and just about every trophy that you could imagine in his trophy case, whose career and reputation has kind of been burnt to a crisp in the last week. And so you look at that and you say, okay, if we had more details, we could probably predict whether or not a team is going to take a chance on this player. And we've seen other players on other teams, that have had their contracts terminated, whether it's been Mike Richards, who was charged with crossing the border with, prescription medication, whether it's Evander Kane and his contract termination in San Jose. Those guys end up getting picked up in other places, and they've done stuff that may have been illegal that we don't know yet on Corey Perry. So I think it's too definitive to say, okay, just because he's 38 years old and this happened, that we know for sure that Corey Perry's career is over. I'm told there have been a couple teams that have expressed interest in the last day or two, obviously clearing waivers. That was going to happen, but there's a lot left to sift through, and we're left with more questions than answers.
That's really interesting. 38 years old. Which team would take another shot on him? It's just the immediate question that comes to mind. Like, Frank, do you have where is there a fit for Corey Perry? Like, how many teams do you think it really is?
It was a nice try, but I'm not going to tell you which teams have poked around.
I'm not asking for names.
But I can't even begin to speculate on what might be a fit, because then, again, we don't know the details, and you're
Sure.
potentially painting a team as one that might be sympathetic to his situation. And I wouldn't want to do that either. But I would say for a player, if we're just purely talking on ice impact and performance, someone who is a pain in the arse to play against, someone who has clutch moments, someone who's won a scoring title and a Hart Trophy, and has Stanley Cup experience, Olympic gold medals. I mean, I can tell you there's a lot of teams that would like that.
All right. Good stuff as always, Frank. Thanks for joining us.
Have a good one, guys.
You as well. There he is. Frank Seravalli of Daily Faceoff. His story is up now at dailyfaceoff.com. And while you're there, check out Wendy's Daily Faceoff Survivor. Okay. Final one from Antagonist. It's our heater Canucks trade proposal of the day. Antagonist didn't give us a actual trade proposal, but I'm going to give this one to you, Harman. Do you see the Canucks targeting Brett Pesce in the offseason, or is that too big of a fish? My question with Pesce is, okay, what's he going to cost? You already got Filip Hronek. You already got Elias Pettersson. Pesce needs a new contract.
Yeah, I like Pesce a lot as a player. One thing that has been interesting about Pesce, because I did a piece last year looking at, some of the top defensive defensemen, and I was breaking down video and just having a conversation with another executive, sort of who essentially brought up the idea that Pesce's a fantastic player, but is he the type? The point was that he may not look as good in a different environment as he would in Carolina. And that he's not quite a driver on his own, even though he has a lot of appealing attributes. And his point was that you may not justify the cost it takes to acquire him. I don't know how much I believe that or not, but you'd have to do a lot of digging on that, because
almost especially like Jalen Chatfield.
Yeah, also just for defensemen in general, you always have to think about, like, fit makes such a huge difference. I mean, you're seeing it with OEL even, right? Of course, his situation, I'm sure the full offseason of recovery helps after, I believe, his performance last season was hindered by the broken foot he sustained at the IIHF World Championships. But going to Florida, he went from borderline unplayable, not one of the Canucks' top 6 defensemen, arguably, to top pair right side minutes in Florida. And the Panthers had a strong winning record without Ekblad and Montour. But yeah, I mean, Pesce's the type of player that if you're serious about taking the next step, it has to be, I think, a bigger, like, you need a high-end defenseman is the point I'm trying to make to take that next step to contender status. Whether it's him, whether it's Brady Shea's also a pending UFA, although he's a lefty. Gustav Forsling in Florida is interesting, where I'm looking at the Panthers and Reinhart is a pending free agent, and he's been lighting the league on fire goals-wise. They've also got Montour, who's in need of a significant raise. Forsling, who's a pending UFA, in need of a significant raise. I don't know if they have the cap space to accommodate and keep all those guys. And Forsling's been, I mean, outstanding in the Panthers as they're all situations top pair defensemen. So the point I'm trying to make is, as we discuss the Canucks' next step, I really would like to see them find a way to land an actual needle mover, not just a Zadorov. Like, if you find a Zadorov type, yeah, he'll upgrade your blue line, but that's not going to elevate you from playoff team to contender status.
Okay.
That's not going to be a big enough sort of upgrade. So you're just going to have to be cognizant of acquisition cost and contract. That's always the hard part, right? Because there's so many players around the league you love, but then you come down to the actual, not just window shopping, but okay, this is what you have to pay. And you're like, ooh, I don't love this player as much as I thought I did.
Karan in the chat said the only way we get Pesce in the offseason is if PD and Hronek take big discounts. We don't expect to happen. So we'll see. Maybe a deep playoff run. They take less. I don't know.
I mean,
maybe
the
not
more
PD.
realistic scenario is probably that you hope to get off of, let's say, Garland's contract and allocate that money to upgrade the blue line. I'm not banking on Pettersson and Hronek taking discounts.
Yeah.
And I think if they do go on a playoff run, they're going to get even more, because there's a good chance that the reason why they're going that far is because Pettersson and Hronek are exceeding expectations.
Maybe Nils Aman. Nils Aman.
Hey, how
leads
about
them.
this one? If Corey Perry doesn't do whatever he did, Anthony Beauvillier is probably still a Vancouver Canuck.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. I mean, almost not even probably. Basically,
I mean, they had
certainly.
the Hall injury, right?
Yeah.
And so they did need to add someone to play with Bedard, but that was just kind of the cherry on top at the end of it.
But now they needed to add Beauvillier. They needed to add a guy. So yeah, it's a great point, Grady. It's a very good point. Okay, let's get to Betway tomorrow's show. I'm excited for tomorrow's show, boys. When we all come up with an individual trade record of all the trades, every trade. I'm talking like little trades. We're going all the way back. Every little, not transactions, like no waiver pickups, nothing like that, but little trades that they made. Like Lafferty for a fifth needs to be on there. This is the criteria. If you at home want to play along tomorrow in the YouTube live chat, feel free. We're going to each come up with a record and see how our records compare of a win, loss, and toss-up record for the Canucks.
And Horvat and Hronek count as separate trades, even though they used up.
Okay. Yep, separate trades. Those are separate trades.
So something like the Travis Dermott trade, for example.
Counts.
Right. But like, are we putting that, like, where would you classify that as? Because you can you really say that they won that trade? Or
tune in tomorrow and find out, folks.
I'm putting in the tie.
We'll debate this tomorrow.
Yeah, there's our cliffhanger for tomorrow. Grady's already getting started. Okay, let's get to our Betway bet of the day here, Grady, and let's get out of here ahead of tomorrow. Okay, Betway. LA Kings. Simple. Keeping it simple tonight, folks. LA Kings to beat the Washington Capitals on the money line. A $10 bet at minus 200 odds gets you a $15 return. 90 plus play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly over at Betway. Okay. Harm, any closing thoughts? Are you ready to get out of here and get to work on that trade record for this
I want to
regime?
work on that trade record.
One day in the summer, we'll go back to the Benning regime and compare them.
Oh my God.
So we're gonna come up with these. We're gonna come up with these tomorrow. Like this is your homework for tonight, tomorrow morning, whenever you want to do it. You go back, you look at all the trades, and we'll come up with a number. Make sure we all have the same number. Then we go back and do the Benning regime and see how those records compare to this point.
Whatever it is, the OEL trade has to count for like 3 losses in one.
Nope, that's one loss. It was one trade. It's one trade.
No,
it's one trade. And also should mention the buyout doesn't count as toward our records or whatever. The OEL buyout doesn't count toward anything when it comes to this regime and their trade records, as you probably would have assumed. But that's tomorrow's show, folks. For now, we'll close it out there. For my co-host, Harman Dylan, our technical producer, Grady Sass, my name is David Quadrelli. Our thanks again to Frank Seravalli for joining us on today's episode of Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation with Harman and Quads every weekday at 2 p.m. Be sure to check it out on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. And if you missed it, go check it out on your favorite